Begin Kavod HaSaniyah. I'd like to thank my dear friend and colleague, Rabbi Chaim, for a beautiful and warm introduction. The truth is, I'm here speaking reluctantly. Spoke to Reb Shmuel. Where's Reb Shmuel? There you go. So I mentioned to him when we spoke that in the many years that I had the privilege of learning with Rabbi Heinemann in his house, he once told me that in the years that he learned by Rabbi Kollel would not look at the Etrog or Lulav or answer any questions about the Arbba Minim before Yom Kippur. He would look at the person with his big, penetrating blue eyes, and he would say, "Have you finished all of your questions and tshuva that now you're asking and you're busy with the Arbba Minim?" And indeed, the Yalkut Shimoni writes that the first day of Sukkot is called Rishon Hu Lachem, and the Chazal give us the drasha. It's Rishon Lecheshbon Ha'avonot. It's the first day after Yom Kippur that Hashem starts counting our sins again. In truth, there are 5 days in between, and the Yalkut writes those 5 days people are busy with building the sukkah and finding the etrog and lulav, which would seem to indicate that really you should be busy with that after Yom Kippur. But at the same time, we find in the halachic literature, in Mateh Ephraim, who's the source of the Ashkenazic literature of halacha and minhag, he writes that if you have your hands, if you get your hands on Arbba Minim before Yom Kippur, zariz v'niskar, zerizim matkim mitzvot, to go and find a Arbba Minim that's mehudar, and he writes that the zechut of the mitzvah of Arbba Minim is going to be machriya the din of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, as the Rav mentioned, that a person's hidur mitzvah, zeh divan mehu, like the Gemara says in Baba Kama Daf Tet, the beautifying of the mitzvot, the care and the love that we show in the Kdukei mitzvah, in being particular about the mitzvot, that by itself shows a certain love and care about the mitzvot of Hashem, which would have in its power to tilt the din of Rosh Hashanah as well. Now, when talking about the purchase of Arbba Minim, there are many things that are not known widely by people, and there are many things that are known, but it could be a misconception or not fully aware of the details and the extent of the things. Many of those we could touch on today in the brief time that we have, but I want to make a disclaimer first that today we're not discussing necessarily halacha l'maaseh, the halachot of Arbba Minim are very complex, very lengthy, and very tedious, and we are basically trying to offer a basic intro to halachot of Arbba Minim, that we should become more of what we would call a educated consumer, to know what's a question, what's not a question, and so on. The truth is, there's a debate between the Rishonim. The Gemara says in Masechet Pesachim, 30 yom kodem hachag, you start she'ela udrisha b'ilchot hachag. The Tur in Siman Taf Kaftet discusses this, whether or not this only applies to Pesach, that 30 days before the Chag, you must start educating yourself about the Chag, or maybe, perhaps it applies to Shavuot and Sukkot as well. Maram Bet Yosef writes that perhaps this only applies to Pesach, because Shavuot doesn't really have Hilchot HaChag. It has the halachot of Yom Tov, the regular Yom Tov that you're used to, and he writes that by Sukkah, the Sukkah is very easy to build. Shnayim kilchatan v'shlishi dafidu tefach, and lulav and etrog. Rov lulavim, he writes, are kasher, rov etrogim are kasher, so therefore there's not much to learn. At the same time, especially in the industry of Arbba Minim, that Baruch Hashem, we have, as Achshur Dari, the generation has become much more sophisticated. There's much to know and much to be known, and we try to just educate ourselves a little bit in the halachot of Arbba Minim. Now, many people speak about Arbba Minim, and the industry is a multi-million-dollar industry of 2 weeks that has turned into, in a negative way, perhaps a cynical way, but the truth is that much of this halachot are important to know. For instance, you have a lulav, and you say, what could be wrong with a lulav? I go to my backyard and I have a palm tree, and it has a beautiful 4-foot-long lulav on top of it. I'll cut it up. It's much nicer than whatever I could get out here. Well, let's not be too quick to decide like that, because there's a big machloket between, perhaps it could even be between the Tanaim, whether or not when the Torah says, Anaf etz avot v'arve nachar and kapot temarim, maybe kapot temarim means that it has to be related to a tree, that type of dekel, that type of palm tree produces fruits of temarim. You have several different types and species of temarim, and many of them, they do not, the whole type does not produce temarim at all. For instance, in 60 years ago, in Tafshin Yud Zayin and Tafshin Yud Chet, this became a very heated topic in Eretz Yisrael. All of the halachic magazines were writing back and forth about this for about 2.5 years in Hamayan and in Or Torah and so on. Whether or not, let's say, there is a type of tree that we have it a few blocks down over here on Olympic, I think it's by Shenandoah and so on. It's called cannery, the cannery tree. If you know what different types look like, you would know that the trunk of the tree is much wider, the leaves bend in a beautiful way like a bow, and even the type of the leaves is different. The length and the width and the way each one of the leaves comes out, the stem of the leaf is different, and that is a machloket that is kasher or not. The first one that spoke about this was Khatam Sofer. About 250 years ago, he was asked that in Pressburg, where they were, they didn't have trees that would, anything in the vicinity that would produce temarim, and what they had available were things that did not produce any fruits. And Khatam Sofer writes, although the Torah writes it has to be kapot temarim, doesn't mean dafka that every tree that you take from has to have temarim. The type of dekel is one, and you could use it and it's kasher. On the other hand, Rav Moshe Feinstein, for instance, in America, which has become accepted by Hershel Schachter, many others, and so on, even from the current poskim, in Igrot Moshe Chelik Aleph, Siman Kuf Chav Gimel, he discusses this cannery trees, and he says it's pasul even b'di'evet. If someone uses, you go just to your backyard, to your tree next door, and you take something, and it's not a kasher type of palm tree, even b'di'evet, he says it's pasul. On the other hand, Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach disagrees with him, and this is brought both in Harbadia's writings, in Abi Omer, in Yechad, in Chelik Aleph Siman Samach Zayin, he has a tshuva on it, and so on. He writes that they discuss this with the agricultural experts that are frum as well. This again, because of the machloket that was back and forth, many brought non-Jewish experts in agriculture, and they said that in the divisions of trees, these are two different families, and you can't even call them the same type of dekel, so therefore it's pasul. On the other hand, Rabbi Eliezer Waldenberg, the son-in-law of Rabbi Tzvi Pesach Frank, that is Eliezer in Chelik Chet, Siman Chaf Bet, he writes an extensive tshuva, and he brings in two of the frum agriculturists, I guess you could call it, the experts in agriculture, and he says that these are halachically the same family, and he proves it, and so therefore he says it's kasher. You could be even making the bracha. Haravadia takes that approach. Shlomo takes that approach, but at the same time, at the end of the day, this becomes a machloket poskim. And since we're dealing with a doraita, obviously it's kedai to pay attention where the lulavim come from. Now you have an industry of lulavim by itself. They have dairy lulavim that people pay $100 for it, and so on and so forth. California lulavim. But the main point of it is that in Psak Halacha, you have to realize that there's a machloket between the poskim, and Rabbi Chabergaon, Sofnat Pa'aneach, Alav Shalom, he writes in his sefer that this perhaps is machloket Tanaim in Yerushalmi between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Tarfon, that one of them holds, Rabbi Tarfon holds that the ones that do not produce temarim, they're pasur, and the ones that produce temarim, they're kasher. And now you have to know what the halacha is, which becomes very complex. The Gemara in Ketubot of Peidalet discusses whether or not Rabbi Akiva is a student of Rabbi Tarfon, or maybe is his peer. Because we have a klal in halacha ki Rabbi Akiva mechavero v'lo merabotav. Rabbi Akiva, when discussing and debating a halacha with any of his peers, halacha is like Rabbi Akiva. But when he discusses the halacha with Rabbi Eliezer HaGadol, when he's Rabbi Yeshua, then halacha is not like Rabbi Akiva necessarily. And here it becomes a very complex thing according to the Rabbi Chaver, whether or not Rabbi Tarfon and Rabbi Akiva halacha should be like Rabbi Akiva. So therefore, I'm just putting it out there. One thing that the person has to be mindful, although in Karadin it seems the idea of the majority of the halachic authorities that this should be kasher, at the same time, nevertheless, midas afek lo mafkinan still is a safek. Now the Gemara says that the shidra of the lulav has to be covered with leaves. The Biur Halacha in Tafresh Mem Hey discusses whether or not rov, the majority of the shidra, is enough, or maybe the entire shidra, the spine of the lulav, has to be covered with leaves. Now, to understand this, first we have to understand what the shidra is. Does everyone know here what the shidra of lulav is? Okay, so there is, but imagine to yourself, it would be much better if you had either pictures or actual lulav, but imagine an open, fully grown leaf of a palm tree, right? You have the stem in the middle, and all the leaves are coming from two sides out. So when it's closed, before the leaves open, all the leaves are sitting, lying down upwards on that stem, and that stem is called the shidra. From one side you can see it, from the other side you cannot. And when you do the nanuim, the side that the shidra is seen should be facing you. So that shidra, the Gemara says, has to be covered with the leaves. And Biur Halacha in Tafresh Mem Hey brings a machloket poskim, whether or not the entire thing has to be covered, or majority of it is enough. Halachically speaking, we assume that this does not have a clear answer. And Biur Halacha also leaves it as a sarich yun, so therefore we're machmir. But Chazon Ish, for instance, in Siman Kuf Mem Vav, in the writings of the Chazon Ish, he writes that the entire stem, the entire shidra, the 4 tfachim that you need, has to be really covered. So therefore, that only becomes nogeh really nowadays for people who take off a lot of leaves from the sides to tie the lulav with. Everyone knows what I'm talking about? You take a leaf down, another one, you have 5 lulavim, 5 sets, 10 sets for your whole family, and you use one lulav to take the leaves off and tie the sets that you have. So the bottom half a tefach of the shidra, of the lulav that you use, the things, now it's not covered anymore with leaves. So that's something to be mindful of. Which really brings us to the next discussion of what is the shi'ur of the Arbba Minim. The Gemara mentions in Masechet Sugad Daf Lamed Bet Amud Bet that there is machloket Amoraim, Rabbi Yochanan, and others as to what is the shi'ur of lulav, the minimum shi'ur. As long as you have it, the longer the better. Magen Avraham writes, in all of these things, the size, the big size, is a part of hidur. So the longer, the bigger, the better. At the same time, the minimum size of it be paskin like Rabbi Yochanan, that is shloshat tfachim plus a tefach. Why do I say not 4, just shloshat plus a tefach? You'll see in a minute. We have 4 tfachim, which is 3 plus 1. 3 is the minimum shiur, and because you need ninuim or nanuim, you need another extra tefach. Now, what is the shiur of this in centimeters or inches? Is 9 different shitas in the poskim to make things complex. How is it 9? It's 3, which each one of them has 3, which comes out to be 9. Is this
there if you want to use them?
I can't even see this. Okay, good. We'll
later on we need to add that.
Okay, great. So the 3 shitas that we have is first and foremost we'll discuss it as it goes, and then we'll see how each one of them has 3 different measurements in halacha. Now the Gemara says that it has to be 4 tfachim. But at the same time, the Gemara brings that Rabbi Tarfon held that these tfachim are tfachim of Amma bat chamisha tfachim. It's a smaller shiur. Instead of having 6 tfachim in every Amma, 5 tfachim in every Amma. And many of the Rishonim, Tur and Tosafot and so on, and the Ran and the Rashba, they pass in that the shiur of Arbba tfachim of the lulav is based on Rabbi Tarfon. We pass in like Rabbi Tarfon. So therefore, ends up being, before I say this, I just don't want you to lose me. If I would ask you, the crowd here, how much is Arbba tfachim? Give me a measurement. What would you say?
1 meter.
1 meter.
12 inches.
Huh? 12 inches.
28 centimeters.
28 centimeters, right? Which is 4 times 8, right? 4 times 8. So that's what we usually think, right? Maran does not pass like that. We are much more lenient than that. And this is one of the things that's not widely known, and that's what we're here to discuss. The first group of the Rishonim that we mentioned, they all say that over here we need 13 etzba'ot and a third. 13 etzba'ot and a third, which I'm not giving inches and centimeters because that by itself is a machloket. But that's how much we need. Normally we would think that every tefach is 4 etzba'ot, so if you need 4 tefachim, you need 16 etzba'ot, right? This Rishonim hold that each one of them is less than 4 etzba'ot, is 3 plus, so therefore you end up with 13 and a third. Now Ramban, this is the Tur and others that I mentioned, Ramban has a very interesting shita. Ramban says the first 3 ones, that's the shi'ur of the lulav, is Rabbi Tarfon, but the top tefach has to be a normal full-fledged tefach, and it's bigger, it's 8 centimeters. So therefore Ramban comes out with a shiur of 13.6. In other words, the 13 etzba'ot and 2/3, or 14. It basically comes out 14 etzba'ot according to Ramban. And Rambam and the Rif, they don't even bring the Rabbi Tarfon. So Rosh, speaking about them, Rosh writes that the Shita of the Rambam and the Rif both is that you have to go with full-fledged 4 etzba'ot a tefach, 4 tefachim, it's 16 tefachim. Okay? So you would think that Maran is going to pass in like Rambam and the Rif, but Maran does not. Maran paskins in Stam Shulchan Aruch, and behold, Stam the Yesh Halacha is Stam. Maran brings the first Shita as Stam Halacha, the 13.3, which is 13.3333, 13 Etzba'ot and a third, is the Halacha for Lulav, and then he brings the other 2. Many of the Sephardi Achronim, including Tafachayim and Techida and many others, they say that Lechatchila, Arbba also, that you have to Lechatchila be machmir for the Shita of Rambam. But Meikar Adin, if one does not find a lulav that's long enough, the shudra of it, then you could be mekel, like Maran writes in the shiur of 13.3. Now that we have that, you have to understand how much is tefach. Let's imagine you're going with Rambam. Okay, everyone is with me? You're going with the Rambam, 4 tefachim, each one 4 etzba'ot. Now, how much in centimeters is that? Right? So you said 24, right? 8 centimeters a tefach. That is the shita of most of the poskim, and halachically the Sephardim in many generations. You see from the literature of the Sephardi halacha in past perhaps 250 years that we have accepted upon ourselves that shiur, which is 8 centimeters, right? It's 3.2 inches, okay, if you want to be exact. On the other hand, you have the famous shita of the Chazon Ish, which comes out to 3.8 inches, which is 10 centimeters. And then you have the Aruch HaShulchan, which is less known. Aruch HaShulchan, which Rav Moshe finds in several places, and Rav Moshe brings it, and the Talmidim of Rav Moshe in America, they basically all follow Rav Moshe's shita, is 3.6 inches, which is 9 centimeters. Now, halachically, as we mentioned, although now you have 9 shitas in front of you, it's for us, the Sephardim, we have accepted Divrei Maran, and we have accepted our minhag, how to measure tefachim is 8 centimeters. So therefore, you can mekel to do the smallest of the 9 shitas, right? So that's our halakha. But at the same time, realizing that this is the oraita, we try to be machmir if you go to a sale. I'm sure Shlomo here has boxes of lulavim. So you choose something that the shidra is large enough to really be able to fit all of those shitot in it. Now, the Gemara says that if you have a tiomet, which the tiomet is open, then the lulav is pasul. For understanding what the Gemara says, you have to first understand what the tiomet is. Now, shidra, I wish we had good pictures. The way it is, again, imagine an opened leaf of palm tree. The stem goes until a certain point, and then the last 2 leaves leaves that leave from it, that separate from it, they obviously extend another few inches or tfachim or whatever based on the largeness of the tree. Then they are back stuck together. Then you have the stem, which the leaves are separating from, and then the last place when the leaves start sprouting out, that is the end of the shidra. When we say 4 tfachim, it has to be from the bottom until the top. That's the 4 tfachim that you have. Now, the tiomet, according to Rashi and the Geonim, Rashi writes in Gemara in Daf Lamed Dalet that you have a tiomet that's 2 leaves that come out of the end of the shidra. In other words, the shidra, when it finishes, you have 2 other leaves that are going simultaneously growing out of the shidra, and that is the explanation of tiomet. Tiomet is the 2 top. Yeah, I mean, this is if you have. I don't have a good picture here, but if you would have. For example, if you had, this shows how the leaves are coming out. When it ends, the stem of the tree, the leaf ends, there are 2 simultaneous leaves that come out of it, and those 2 are considered tiomet. Now the Tosafot write in Baba Kama, Baba Metzia, in Daf Tzadi Vav, the Tosafot write that according to Rashi, we can't find any lulav that's kasher. This is all the lulavim that grow in our place, writes the Tosafot, they have only 1 leaf on the top. But at the same time, the Tosafot brings that the Geonim, they agree with Rashi. In other words, this is something that perhaps 90+% of people do not know. According to Rashi and Geonim, the lulav that's kasher lechatchila has to have 2 tiomets, 2 top leaves that they simultaneously come up, and there's no middle one. The Tosafot disagrees. The Tosafot disagrees with this shita and says, even if you have just 1 leaf on the top, that's considered tiomet. Now, if the tiomet is, each one of them is 2, that they are, meaning each leaf is 2 sides that are attached to each other, if that attachment breaks on the length of most of the leaf, then the whole lulav is pasul. This is according to Rashi and Tosafot. According to Rashi, you have 2 leaves that they separate. And if both of them are torn apart, the 2 sides of the same leaf, they're torn apart, that is pasul. And according to Rashi, according to Tosafot rather, if you have 1 leaf, that 1 top leaf, and the majority of the length of the leaf is separated, the 2 sides, then it's pasul. Okay? So this is the reason, by the way, that you see Ashkenazim are very machmir. They're looking for many minutes on top to find out the middle leaf of the lulav and make sure that it is sealed all the way until the top, right? Now, why Sfaradim are not as machmir is because of the following. Because Rif and Rambam, they say that's not what tiomet means. If I would ask you what tiomet means, we would say the middle thing. Rambam and Rif disagree. Rambam and Rif say that each leaf, each single leaf of the lulav has 2 sides that are attached to each other from one side. Meaning they're lying on top of each other, they're attached from this side, and then they are lying on top of each other. You could open it, and then you could tear it apart. Right? This attachment is called tiomet, says the Rambam and the Rif. And when the Gemara says a lulav, that its tiomet is broken, is pasul, it means if you have the majority of the leaves, that you have tore apart the 2 sides of the leaf from each other, then it's pasulish. Almost none of the lulavim that we have would become pasul, according to Rambam and the Rif, because of the chisaron of tiomet. So therefore, Maran obviously paskins like Rambam and the Rif. At the same time, Arvadi, Yosef, and others, they say lechatchila, a person should be machmir like the Rama, to be machmir like the Tosfot and Rashi. And it comes out an interesting chumrah that perhaps if you find a lulav that has 2 middle leaves, it's better than having 1 middle leaf, because you see from the Tosafot that we mentioned, Daf Tzadi Vav, that according to Rashi and Geonim, if you have only 1 middle leaf, is not good. So that's just a side chumrah, which we don't pass him like it, but it's there nevertheless. Now, the Gemara also says that a lulav shenifratzu alav is pasul. If you have a lulav that nifrat, how do we translate nifras? Usually we say v'chen yirbe v'chen yifrotz, right? Spreading out, going out. So we would think that nifratzu alav means when the leaves are already opened, versus the lulav that we're used to, that everything is closed. Rashi says a similar thing. Rashi says in the Gemara, nifratzu alav is when they totally have separated from the stem of the branch. And the Tosafot disagrees with Rashi. It's not the time to go through what the Tosafot says. Rambam and the Rif, again, they say the psul is when it's drooped down. When all the leaves are open and they droop down, that's when it's pasul. So now, that doesn't have so much of a lemase for us because all the lulavim are closed. But what becomes lemase is what the Magid Mishnah writes. Magid Mishnah writes in Perek Chet on the Rambam that he writes it B'Shem the Geonim, the Ran brings it, many others as well, that a person that has a lulav that's open but it's not totally drooped down, that will be pasul, still is not the chatchila. If you have a lulav that things are totally open from each other, according to the Magid Mishnah, that's not mitzvah min hamufchar. According to the Geonim that Magid Mishnah brings, the lulav has to be totally sitting on each other in a straight way attached to the shidra. Now, some of the Achronim disagree with this. The Taz is very unhappy about this, and he says even the open ones that you do not nuim with is lechatchila kasher, but at the same time, you have the Mama Mordechai, the Chida, and many others that they say lechatchila, we should be machmir for the Geonim to choose a lulav that's totally closed and it's not even open a little bit. So that's the source of one of the Sephardi chumras. That we don't do nanui, we don't shake to make noise out of the lulav, rather we do holacha v'hava'ah, we just take it front and back. By us, we could be more machmir like this chumra of the Geonim to make sure that the lulav is closed in a full way. Now, the Gemara has another thing of akum. The Gemara says a lulav that is bent like a sickle is pasul, which doesn't happen nowadays so much, because it has to be fully bent. You know, this about a total circumference of 50 degrees or so, and that's not really matsui. But on the other hand, the Gemara also says that kafuf is also pasul. Now, kafuf is something that happens every single year. I get a question like that. We translate kafuf as bent over, right? The Rosh writes that kafuf does not mean the leaves of the top of the lulav being bent over like this. Rather, it means that it has to be with the shidra together, bent, and then it's pasul. And says the Rosh, this is the famous Rosh. The Rosh writes, if the leaves are bent, not only is not pasul, but it's more lechatchila. He says, I would prefer. The Rosh writes, I would prefer to have a lulav that the top leaves are bent over, because then you could make sure that they're not separated. It's like a seal. You grew with a seal, it's not easy to tamper with it. You know, a regular thing bangs the place and right away opens the top of it. But if you have it bent over, it's like a seal and it's more secure, says the Rosh. That's what he says, I would choose that. Yeah.
What does he do with the idea of it being pointed like a spear type of a thing? Isn't that more of a hidur than it being bent?
Well, it never says that it has to be like a spear. Although the Midrash says we're coming with our Torah brings it that we're coming with our swords, but it doesn't mean, it means that the lulav looks like a sword, not that it has to be pointy necessarily. So says the Rosh, that's not kafuf that the Gemara says is pasul, it's even more lechatchila, I would pay more money for it, says the But Mishnah Berurah and many others, they say, even the Rosh, is only talking about the middle leaf, what we call tiomet according to Tosafot and Rashi perhaps, that being bent. But if most of the leaves are bent over, that already would not, I think this sefer would have a sefer, I think it's just saw a picture of this. If you had most of the leaves already bent over, that would even according to Rosh be pasul. So therefore, if you have a lulav that the top part of it is bent over, even if it's just a third of an inch, that's bent on its own, that is a question which you should really show it to a Rav to see whether that's lachatchila or maybe even pasul b'diavad, because according to the rest of the poskim, even according to Rosh, it's only one leaf, not more. So that is one issue that has to be out there as well. Now this also brings us to the next thing, which the Sfaradim really would like to know, and that's what we call the cover that grows with the lulav, the korah, that is the brownish reddish cover that's on top. Many people prefer to have that. Within the Ashkenazim you don't find it. Within Hasidim you find some of them have it. Within the Ashkenazim they prefer not to have it. Within the Sfaradim, by us, we want to have it. Now there are two reasons for having or not having it. The Ashkenazim don't want to have it for two reasons. A, it's not practical for them because they have to shake the lulav and the leaves have to be somewhat opened to make a noise, and the korah would not stay on it, it would just fall apart. B, they would tell you like this: you have all this psulim, all these problems, potential problems with the top of the lulav, and if you don't know what's under the korah, maybe it's pasur, maybe you have a chiyuv of checking it. Why wouldn't you just take this off and see what's underneath it? We just mentioned that if it's bent over, it could be pasul if it's more than one leaf. So why don't you just take it off and check it? Mamar Mordechai addresses this question. He's one of the Gedolei Sfaradim. He writes that the reason is because this looks more together. This is the gidul of the lulav. At the same time, you don't have to be worried about the problems, because even if it has a little bit separation on the top or it's a little bent, it's not posel according to the Sfaradim. Again, you remember, according to Maran, it has to be a rove of the leaves of the lulav in order to become pasul. So says Rabbi Mordechai, it's not going to be rove of the adim, so therefore it's kasher. That's the Mamar Mordechai, and that's basically the halacha for the lulav. Now, by etrog, it's very interesting that the industry of etrog changed about 7 or 8 decades ago, and the reason for it is mentioned really in the Ramah. The Ramah writes in his Tshuvot HaRamah, Siman Resh Chavvav. Rav Moshe Isserlis writes that a etrog that's murkav, if it's grafted with other types, is pasul, because it's no longer considered biblically etrog. There are other poskim who wrote that etrog that's murkav is kasher, and you see even from the levush that the fact that's murkav in and of itself would not really be a problem. Levush writes, Rav Mordechai Yafeh, the Levush writes, the reason that murkav is pasur is because you have done something that's asur to do. What you have done is grafting, and grafting is kilayim be'ilanot, and that's asur, so therefore it's pasur. Others very strongly disagree with him. Say, oh, wait, the goyim are not thing on that, you could go buy it from a goy. And therefore, it should be kasher. Shach, actually, the Tshuvot Yaakov brings from the Shach, the famous Siftei Kohen, Rav Shapra Kohen, he first was matir to say bracha on even a etrog that was murkav, but then he retracted. So halacha lema'aseh, we paskin that etrog and murkav is asur. Now the problem with this is very obvious, because etrog is very hard to maintain. Lemon, and the whole family of lemon, is much easier to grow and much easier to maintain. And if you graft a etrog tree with lemon or any type of the family of lemon, it becomes yellower, nicer, bigger, and more symmetric. So therefore, the Goyim, the Arabs, and then the non-religious Jews, they started making an industry out of this by grafting lemon and etrog and selling it into the market. And by the time that we figured it out, it had already spread out and became a problem. So therefore, you have thus you have this whole thing of hechsher and the etrog. That every etrog comes with its pillow and blanket and a stamp on top of it. This is Moroccan, this is Chazon Ish, and so on and so forth. The problem with it is basically because of this Ramah that etrog and murkav is pasur. Now, one of the reasons that you see etrogei Chazon Ish, they became so expensive and so popular is because the Rama also writes, and Tiferet Yisrael brings this as well, that one of the differences that you have between a kasher etrog and a etrog murkav is the bumps. The etrog, they write, it's a bumpy fruit, and lemon is very straight and smooth. So therefore, one of the signs of a etrog that's not murkav is the bumps on top of it. And Chazon Ish went and chose the ones that he felt they were proper, and he gave it to people to grow, and there you have etrogei Chazon Ish. At the same time, we know that many of the etrogim, they don't come with those signs. For instance, you have a Gemara that talks about the pitom of the etrog. If the pitom falls, the etrog is pasul. Now, what is the pitom by itself is a big machloket. Rashi brings from Rabotav a machloket, a dispute between his Rebbein, Rabbeinu Yaakov and Rabbeinu Yitzchak, the two Rebbes of Rashi. One of them holds that the pitom is the top, what we call pitom, and the other one holds no, pitom is a part of the bottom piece. Both pitom and oketz are at the bottom. But regardless of that, we pass in that the pitom that falls is pasul, the etrog is pasul, right? Now, the Temani etrogim, which are naturally more expensive than the other ones, they don't have a pitom. So how is it kasher? The Rosh writes, the reason is because the problem of pitom is that the etrog is not considered hadar. Because you took away something that was the glory of the etrog. So if the etrog doesn't come with it, all the Temani etrogim, the pitom falls very early stages of the growth. So therefore, you don't have a problem of hadar when the growth of that nature of the etrog is without a pitom, right? So that is the different genetics of etrogim. They don't have bumps like Chazon Ish etrogim and so on, but yet the Moroccan and the Temani etrogim are of the most mekudar and most yichusdik etrogim that there are out there, even though that they don't have bumps. Now, when it comes to having dots that are not kasher on etrog, which is one of the two things I want to discuss, it becomes a very interesting thing. The Gemara, the Mishnah says, etrog that has chazazit is pasul. Now, what's chazazit is very, very much not found nowadays. It's like an outgrowth that is like a bump on top of the etrog. The Mishnah says if you have it in the majority of the etrog, or you have it in 3 spots together, it's pasul. Then the Mishnah says if you have a chazazit and the chotem on the top part of the etrog, it also is pasul even if you have one. Now the Rosh takes this, and this is the Mar'eh Shachor comes from this Rosh. Rosh writes, Hu hadid Mar'eh Shachor. Just like chazazit and the chotem makes it pasul, the same is with having a black dot on the top. If you have even one black dot on the top, the whole etrog is pasul. You could have the most beautiful etrog in the world. One black dot on the chotem, you have to trash it. That's what the Rosh writes. Now, 2 things that are important to know. First of all, what is chotem? Does anyone know what chotem is? Chotem is machloket Rashi and the Rosh. Rashi writes, chotem is the circumference around of the etrog at the point that starts sloping inward. Right? When it starts becoming narrower, that line around it, just that line is called chotem, nothing else. That's Rashi. Rosh writes, no. From that, not that line itself, but from that and up is considered chotem. And the halacha is we're machmir for both. We're machmir for Rashi and we're machmir for Rosh. So anything from that line, including the line itself, and up is considered the chotem. And the Shulchan Aruch writes that the consensus of the poskim is that on top of the pitum itself, that little wood that sticks out on the top that has the shoshanta, that is also considered pitum. So if you have a black dot on any of it, the chotem, it's pasul. Now, the good news is about 90% of the black dots that you find on your etrogim, they are not a real black dot. They're just some sort of outside element that's sitting on top of your etrog could be removed. But sometimes it is from the etrog itself. That by itself is machloket poskim. The Bikurei Yaakov, many others, they write that that's only if it's rotten and the black dot is because of that. But if it's from pesticizing or from the natural growth, it's kasher. But the maaseh bottom line halacha, we are noheg that any black dot is part of the growth of the etrog is pasul. We don't deal with it. That's one halacha that's very important. Now, perhaps the most common issue within the Etrogim that we have is the Gemara about Nikav. The Gemara, the Mishnah says in the Chaftin that Etrog that was punctured is pasul. Right? Now, this, to understand the Gemara is very hard because this is a Gemara, the Gemara says, as I mentioned there, the Gemara in Lamed Dal talks about it, and then the Gemara in Lamed Vav. The Gemara in Lamed Vav reiterates this problem, and the Gemara says the following. The Gemara says, that's only when you have a hole that goes through and through. From one side of the etrog, you enter a nail, it goes from the other side, then it's pasul. Or, when the circumference, the ovi, the diameter of the hole is more than an isar, which was a certain coin that they had back then. Right? It's a pretty thick hole. Now, Rashi understands it the following. Please pay attention for just 2 minutes. This is a little complex, but we could do it, I think. Rashi holds like this. Rashi holds that if you have a hole inside the etrog, and then you don't have anything chaser from it, it's kasher. If you puncture a hole, but you don't take anything away from the etrog, it's kasher. And the Gemara in Lamed Vav is giving you a limitation in the kula. This that we are lenient, that's kasher without taking anything away, it's only if you did not go through and through, A, and B, you did not puncture a hole that's wide as a isar. Okay? That's the Shita of Rashi. So according to Rashi, if you have even a little bit taken off of the etrog, is pasul. Okay? Now, Rabbeinu Hananel totally disagrees with Rashi. Rabbeinu Hananel holds that the Gemara in Lamed Vav, and you see, it makes a big nafkamina in Halacha. Rabbeinu Hananel holds the Gemara in Lamed Vav, it's not limiting the kula, it's limiting the chumrah. In other words, the Gemara is saying, when you puncture a hole into an etrog, if it even, and it makes it chaser, it's only pasul if the hole is through and through, or that the hole is as thick, as wide as an isar. So according to Rabbeinu Hananel, if you puncture the hole that's not through and through, and you took off a little bit through puncturing the hole, absolutely kasher. Right? This is the third shita of the Rambam. I'm not going to discuss it because it makes it much more complex. Practically speaking, Rambam and Rashi are basically the same exact thing. So therefore, I'm not discussing how it differs from Rashi. Now, this opens the question that perhaps all of you have dealt with every other year probably, of chaser. You go and you look at the etrog and Rabbi Levi Chaim or anyone else will tell you this is a question of chaser. You look at it and say, what's chaser? It's not, so the whole thing is there. What's chaser? No chaser klum. The Gemara says in Daf Lamed Hey, in between these two Gemarot, Daf Lamed Hey, the Gemara says that niklaf, if you peeled off from the etrog, is kasher. So you say niklaf is kasher. How is it possible niklaf is kasher? So according to Rabbeinu Hananel, there's no problem. According to Rabbeinu Hananel, you peel off the etrog with a peeler to make liquor or whatever jam. It's totally, the etrog is still kasher, right? Because you did not puncture through and through, and it's not like a isar, right? But the Ran writes, according to the other Rishonim, the Ran writes, we're talking about the outer klipa of the etrog. So what does it mean, the outer klipa of the etrog? Every etrog has 3 layers of skin, so to speak. Aside from the juice inside, has 3 layers. There's one thick layer, almost half an inch, that's inside, white layer of skin. Then there is the yellow skin, which is very thin, about 1 millimeter. And then on top of it, there is what we call a glaze. It's like a frost on top of it. It's like a frost on top of the yellow thing that's shiny, right? So Rand says we're talking about that frosty, thin glaze on top of it. If you take that off, the Gemara says it's kasher. But if you take the yellow one off, then boy, is pasul. That's what the Ran writes. The Rambam, the Bach brings the Rambam, and the Bach writes the Rambam agrees with the Ran as well. The Ran as well. And if you hit the white skin, if you have carved enough, that any of the yellow has gone, even if some of it is still there, it's pasul. If only the crust has gone, the frost on top of it has gone, then it's kasher. Okay? These are two shitas. And then you have the Rashba. Rashba, Rabbeinu Shlomo ben Adir, in Chelek Aleph of his Teshuvot, Siman Chet, he writes that as long as you have not hit the white, thick skin, you're good to go. It's kasher. That's what he writes. As long as you have not gotten to that thing, it's kasher. And many Rishonim paskin like the Rashba. Chazon Ish goes as far as saying in Siman Chavbid, Chazon Ish writes that all of the Rishonim agree with the Rashba. This is something for people who have read Chazon Ish enough, they know that Chazon Ish's personality was like that. When he decided something in the Sugya, he makes everyone agree with that. Yeah. So he writes over here that all the Rishonim really agree with the Rashba, that as long as you have not gotten to that thing, it's kasher. Now what's the halacha l'maaseh? It's very difficult. There are those, it's safe to say that if you have only the frost on top that's gone, according to Rov Kechol HaPoskim, it's kasher. And again, we needed about 20-30 etrogim. This really should be given, maybe second part of it after Sukkot. When we have etrogim to show you, there are cases that you see, it's green or yellow, whatever it is, it's still there, but it's just not shiny. That piece is peeled off. The shine on top of this, that's kasher. But if it's already peeled into the yellow or the greenish cover, that according to many could be a problem of chaser, so therefore stay away from it. And show it to your local Orthodox rabbis. That is that. Now the last, not but at least the thing that I want to discuss about this is the green ones. Many of the Persians, they like green etrogim, right? And many of the people who have their own homegrown or their grandfather's homegrown etrog that's temani, that comes like a melon, it's yellow. And sometimes it's smaller and it's not ripe fully, and then it's green. So the question is if green etrogim are kasher or pasul. We paskin, like Rabbi Ishmael in the Gemara, like Rabbi Yehuda rather in the Gemara, in the Mishnah, that etrog hayarok kekarti is pasul. Right? Etrog hayarok kekarti is pasul. And the Rishon in the Rosh writes, that's only if it's going to stay green. But if it's going to become yellow, then it's kasher. But don't stop there. The majority of the poskim, including Kaf HaChaim, the Mishnah Berurah, many others, they say, and Harvadia included, they say that that's only, we're not somach on that, as long as we know the nature of this tree is to turn yellow. Unless this specific etrog has started already to turn yellow. The Bach disagrees with that. The Bach says, even if it started, it's still pasul until it becomes fully yellow. Shuvot Mishkenot Yaakov, one of the greatest of the Achronim, he also writes, he says it's pasul until it becomes fully yellow. But the rest of the Achronim, the majority, it's safe to say the majority of the Achronim, and this is the consensus of the poskim, the normative halacha, that as long as it started turning yellow, it's kasher. Now, what do you do if the etrog that you really like is green? You could turn it yellow manually at home. There is a chemical that's released from many fruit peels of the fruits. It's called, I think, lephalin. Lephalin makes the things ripe very quickly. You peel an apple and you put it, but you have to be careful that you should know what you're doing because you could turn it brown if it touches it and so on and so forth. You can speak to someone that is expert in these things. But at the same time, halachically, it's a challenge to use an etrog that's fully green for sure, and an etrog that's half and half. It has a problem, perhaps a problem of menumar, and according to Mishkanot Yaakov Bach, perhaps that could be pasul even. So therefore, it's something to be mindful when you choose your etrogim. Am I out of town? 4 more minutes? Okay. So, just quickly, a few things about hadassim. The truth is, hadassim are things that people think the least from. They spend 2 hours and they throw 2 hours on this, and then they just grab a hadass and they go. And that is the hardest of the Arbba Minim to find something that's kasher according to everyone. And obviously, I'm just going to give you 2 minutes, not more. It's really an hour and a half shiur just on hadassim. You should know this. Now, what it is, I once wrote an article, 6-7 pages, just on hadassim. The problem is like this. The Gemara says hadass has to be meshulash. Now, what meshulash means is a very big, very difficult thing to understand. Many poskim they hold that Mishulash means that each one of the stems, there are 3 stems that come on the circumference of each circumference of the leaves that come out, they have to be exactly coming out of the same place. Right? Halacha L'Maaseh, we're not, at least people who are not Hasidim and Anshe Maaseh, halacha, bare bone halacha, it's not like that. Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach is the one that, to me, is the normative halacha, and he holds that if you could make a horizontal, fully horizontal circumference line that would pass through all the 3 stems, it's kasher. In other words, the stem is 1.5 millimeters, 2 millimeters wide, right? So as long as you have one line that could go through all of them and be fully horizontal, because if it's like this, it's pasuk, fully horizontal circumference line that would go through all the 3 stems, says Rav Shlomo Zalman was a kasher. And that's something that, you have to now sit and go through each one of the 3 badim, and each one of the circumferences. Now, each one of the circumferences is not really true, because Shulchan Aruch says, lechatchila, tafresh mimbav. Shulchan Aruch says, lechatchila, the entire shiur of 10 espaut to 12 espaut, according to what we are knowing, is 12 espaut, 24 centimeters, of the hadas should be meshulash. But berbon halacha again, as long as rov of it is meshulash, is kasher. But at least at the same time you realize why it's good nowadays that the hadasim come with a hechsher. And you wonder why people pay more for the fancier ones that come with the pillow and blanket, is mainly because it's more specific, and the shiur is kulo versus rubo, which is the Shulchan Aruch's assertion. So now, that is as far as hadasim are concerned, and the only point is that I'm making, do not take from your backyard. Many people here are growing hadasim, including myself, and if you take it from your backyard and say, this is the hadas that I planted from hadas chazonish that I paid $30 for, and it should be kasher, it's not necessarily true. You have to check each one of them, and you have to really know what you're talking about. If you do, kol hakavod. If not, seek help, halachic help, to check the hadasim. Yes?
A lot of times during the Chag, some of the leaves of the hadasim fall off. How much of a problem is that?
So as long as you have rov of it there, rov of the alum there, it's kasher. Now, with Arbba and hadas, there is a machloket that the Bet Yosef brings. Really, it's discussed by Aravot. There is the shita of Baal HaItur that's brought in the Tur. The Tur brings the Baal HaItur, that as long as you have one leaf of Arava, let's say, left, is kasher, right? But halachic, the Shulchan Aruch does not go with that. That's in Bet Yosef. In Shulchan Aruch goes with the rov. So as long as you have rov, really is kasher, and it's not only falling off, it's even if it dries.
So even in the middle of the stem, if all 3 leaves fall off on one stem, that's okay?
That's fine. Yeah. So that is
2 leaves from 3 leaves.
What's that?
In the majority of the hadas, 2 leaves.
If you have 2 out of 3,
2 out of the 3, row of the stem, of the majority. And talk about what about the hefsek between the row. It comes up with a bunch. In other words, the interruption.
Well, that,
all is done in one place.
That again, that's part of the complexity of it. The way it's kedai to be knowing is that you should have a row of 3 tvachim straight up. It's not kedai. This is not a machloket that is a clear minhag to say we go after, in the oraita we go connect that. Again, although really again, this I don't want to open a can of worms. The we pass like Rabbi Yishmael that we need 3 hadasim and 2 aravot, right? Rama writes that in push comes to shop, you could use 1 hadas, right? Not like Rabbi Yishmael. Machloket Tanaim in the Mishnah, right? And Rama recognizes that sometimes push comes to shop and you can't do it. And then he says, so therefore, when we deal with svekot, it's a tailored made case. Each case is different. So you have to seek halachic help. Really, each one of them could be different. But Baruch Hashem, nowadays there's so much bracha that everyone has it. You just have to be careful to look into it to properly deal with it in anything. Now, one thing I want to end with, there's not enough time, just one last thing about Aravot, that we shouldn't have left Aravot out totally. The Pasuk says Arbba Nachal, right? Pasuk says it has to be a type of willow tree that grows by the river, by the water. Now, the Gemara says a drasha. That it's not necessarily that you have to have a tree that's sitting by a river. Even if it's not by now, as long as that type of arava, you uproot it or you branch it and you go plant it in the mountain is also kasher. Rashi brings from his Rebbeim. Rashi says that lechatchila, nevertheless, it has to be from an Arbba that's from a Nachal, right? The Tosafot also bring that you see from the Rif, perhaps in Rambam, from the Rif, not Rambam, from the Rif, that Rif also holds like Rashi, that you have to have Arvei Nachal Mamash, and Tosafot holds even this is leikuba. The Tosafot in Yevamot, right? So this is leikuba. You must have Arvei Nachal Mamash, things that grow by a Nachal, right? The Rosh brings this Rif and Rashi, but then it says, I grew up between the biggest of the Talmidei Chachamim. My Rebbe was Maram Rutenberg, and I came to the Sfaradim, and I never saw anyone be machmir by this. So it's not the minhag, right? On one hand, you have the Rif, the Rashi, many great people. The Tosafot says even the Yikuba. On the other hand, you have the Rambam. The Rambam says that is kasher lechatchila. All types of Arbba is kasher. And the Rema and many others bring that lechatchila a person should be careful to get Arvei Nachal if they could, but otherwise, as long as it's not saftzefah, it's not a different type of Arbba, is kasher. So I always say, in 2025, probably the chumrah of the day is going to be to sell specific Arabot that they took it from the river. We haven't gotten there yet, but that's enough. There's enough ground in the poskim, based on the Tosafot and the Rashi and the Rif, to be machmir on Arvei Nachal Dafka. B'ezrat Hashem, the carefulness and the dikduk that we have in this mitzvah should be a zachut for Yom Adin for all of us, to be zocher to Shana Tova U'Mevorechet. Amen.